Welcome to the Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 Intelligent Intranet. I'm Mark Cashman, running this one solo with the help of a bunch of SharePoint agents at my side. Oh, the agentics of this one are going to be off the hook in a controlled and manageable fashion, of course. Now, SharePoint agents, I call upon you. Are you ready? All right, today's episode is a two-parter. First, we're going to chat with Matt Wolodarsky from the SharePoint team. Matt is a data-driven principal product manager at Microsoft who focuses on customer success. He's with the customer success experience team, and he's often working with our customers in the early stages of product design and those customers' adoption. So for today's conversation, we're going to tap into much of what Matt has been doing and focusing on in the last few months, working with about 80 plus early adopter customers to best understand their use of SharePoint agents and how we can craft and shape how they work to meet their outcomes now and some of the asks and hopes and dreams that they had in the future. Then for part two, you're going to hear from Brent Sanders and Henke-Gunvaldson from the internal legal team here at Microsoft, sharing how they put SharePoint agents to work on our internal legal portal that we call CELAWeb to help others navigate the nuance and complexity of legal matters as they engage with customers and partners year-round. Their new SharePoint agent is a go-to resource for about 3,000 plus Microsoft marketers to get a quick and reliable answer or answers to their marketing, legal, and compliance questions related to campaigns or whatever they're doing with customers and partners when they need it. Marketers, like most of us, possibly like you and me right now, hate searching for answers, especially ones that they can't find. And legal professionals, specifically on the subject matter expertise side of the house, the seek and find answer givers, the equation ends up them spending too much time answering the same questions over and over. Thus, SharePoint agents to the rescue. They're a great fit to help spread the knowledge. The legal team here at Microsoft then developed a SharePoint agent that does just that, spread knowledge and save people time. Before we dive in with Matt and then with Brent and Anna, I wanted to give a SharePoint Agents 101 so that you know going into it, when you hear the phrase and the words SharePoint agents, you know what it means. SharePoint agents are natural language AI assistants connected to SharePoint sites. And as you'll hear, grounded in the content that you want the agent to be grounded in within that site. And you can be very specific. They offer always available scoped subject matter expertise that surfaces insights to help you scale support and assist with planning and creating. And as you'll hear throughout the episode, a lot of different scenarios and use cases. Of course, as you bind it to specific sites or narrow it down to certain document libraries filled with content, you are making the agent more specific in what it is intended for. So the basics of a SharePoint agent. You can create a SharePoint agent in a few clicks. You can also just have an agent without a click, because if you have access to SharePoint agents, you will see that SharePoint sites get a SharePoint agent by default. And then, of course, you can create your own and further refine what it is those agents do. They also work not only in SharePoint, but can be added to a Teams chat where you can then mention the SharePoint agent by the name that you give it, as if it's a participant in the chat, but also remember, grounded in that site or the refined scope of content, so that when you add that agent to a chat, there are specific things that you can then ask it and expect it to be an expert resource for that chat. Last, they are connected to the Microsoft 365 Copilot licensing, and I will have a link that will take you to learn a lot more about any of the licensing nuance that you need to know as you start to think about making the investment to then use and create your own SharePoint agents. Hopefully that gives you a great 101 of what SharePoint agents are. I guarantee you by the end of these next conversations, you're going to be fluent not only on what they are, but how they can be used and how Microsoft is using them internally as a great resource just to learn about how you can put SharePoint agents to work. So let's start off and move our conversation number one to hear from Matt Wolodarsky from the SharePoint team. very pleased now to turn to our first guest of this episode. That is Matt Wolodarsky, who has been working with a lot of our customers internally, about 80 plus customers, in an early adopter program for SharePoint agents over the course of a couple of months in a pilot and testing phase. There's a lot that's come out of that as learning, and that is why we're here to talk to Matt. So Matt, can you give us a little sense of who you are on the SharePoint team and maybe just a summary of some of this work that you've been doing, giving you that credibility of being a SharePoint agents expert?
Thanks, Mark, for having me on the show. So yeah, as you mentioned, I'm Matt Wolodarsky. I work within the SharePoint engineering organization as a customer experience program manager. And what we do as CXPMs, as we call it, essentially is, as I view it, ultimately to help customers realize value and be successful with our technologies. And a couple ways that we do that is certainly working with customers to learn from them, to help them adopt, apply best practices as we learn across both internal customers at Microsoft and the external customers we work with. So publishing that out to customers broadly in the forms of adoption playbooks and other materials. But also very importantly, especially with new products like SharePoint agents, we work with that private preview group of customers and our product team. I'm embedded as part of the product team to make sure that we have the voice of the customer at the center of everything that we do from a product making perspective. So, I'm ultimately working to help us achieve product market fit with SharePoint agents so that customers are getting great value out of their investments in Microsoft 365 Copilot and SharePoint agents more specifically.
With the 80 plus customers, do you mind just giving the quick matrix without revealing any of the customer names? Just the types of customers we've worked with, maybe different industries, different sizes, just to give us a sense of who you've talked to.
Absolutely. It's a real cross-section across industries. This was really important from a recruitment perspective to make sure that we've got all of the industries that we work with represented, whether that's healthcare, pharmaceutical, professional services, manufacturing, consumer good companies, you name it. We've got that representation. And also, importantly, we wanted to make sure that we have a cross-section of organizations of different sizes, because the opportunities and challenges may be a little bit different, whether you're a smaller mid-market customer versus a large enterprise organization. So that's generally the breakdown. Also, making sure across different global markets that we're not just centered on one or two countries, that it truly is an international program. And that does at times cause for some later nights or some real time zone orchestration to make it work, but it's well worth it.
Well, maybe a SharePoint agent can help you in your future, help you with those different time zones. They can just ask Matt as their agent of choice. But it's really great to hear, obviously, the broad reach out to customers, both to inform what is oftentimes approached as SharePoint as a horizontal platform, but with vertical input being the different industries and the different types of customers really will relate to the different types of agents that they want to create, which will inform, obviously, what it is that you and the product team do. So let us jump right in and maybe ask the broader question. It really is, what have you heard from these customers that you've been working with? 80 plus customers have a lot of feedback, and I'd love for you to share what you've been hearing them talk about when they've used SharePoint agents or learned more of what they can do. Were there any highlights that you would share that were common pieces of win type feedback and any lessons learned or things that people were asking for in the future?
Yeah, I would say the most consistent feedback I've heard is how customers are really loving the ability to ground AI and how they apply it in their organization's authoritative content. Customers have obviously a lot of options when it comes to applying AI to their organization, but they want to do it in the context of the unique information and knowledge of their company. And I'm sure we'll get into this more, but SharePoint agents really enables that in a very simple and quick way. And ultimately what this does is it helps customers cut out the noise, or more specifically users cut out the noise that might come with more generalized AI products.
Being a very light user of SharePoint agents, I do have one for the Interzone, and it really was exactly what you described. I could very much scope it down to a specific document library that happened to have all of the blogs that I've written for the show. So it has the people that were in it, the topics that we talked about, and sometimes links to more information. So now people can query just off of that set of blogs, not my entire site, not everything about the Interzone. And so I would +1 to your 80 plus customers with that feedback. I'm also curious, if there was any common themes that came back as things that were asks of the future of SharePoint agents. Anything that bubbled up as a common theme for something that people want to see in the future?
Yeah, I would say one of the key areas that customers are asking for, which the team is very much working on, has to do with supporting more content types. So today, it's Office documents, so Word documents, PowerPoint, new Microsoft 365 formats like Loop, universal formats such as PDFs, and finally SharePoint pages. And so, as we know, knowledge can be embedded in a lot of other types of content inside an organization, and that might be content that's stored in lists, images that are embedded in PowerPoint presentations or PDF documents, especially for organizations where there's a lot of technical detail in what they do. Images is a pretty strong content format. And then also meeting recordings and other videos. All of these are examples of where the team right now is working on enabling to be content sources that SharePoint agents can interrogate.
Yeah, I love that concept, and the benefit, I think, of anybody listening is everything Matt just walked through from a content type perspective, where things live and what format they're in. It's all in the SharePoint platform primarily, so we have a really solid foundation for the team to work off of to pull that in as a data source. So excellent to hear, and I'm really glad that the customers are asking those questions, meaning that they want to build out their information architecture in a certain way that derives what the agent then can pull information from. So as you were working with these customers and listening, were there any helpful markers or questions that the customers can ask themselves, things that you learned that were common questions, just to determine whether the SharePoint agent's offering is a good fit for their business, big or small? Are there any matrices of questions or ways that you would, maybe ask out loud here that people can then identify? Oh yeah, I have that same question, I have that same need, and sounds like SharePoint agents are a good fit. What might people consider when they're thinking about whether this is a good technology for them or not?
Yeah, aside from, the broad perspective that there's literally thousands of different scenarios that you could use a platform like this for, there are two particular areas where, to help customers get a little bit more specific, I would suggest looking at from both a content and knowledge perspective, and then secondly, a process perspective. And maybe the specific questions for each of these, starting with content and knowledge, is for customers to ask, do we have content that is stored in SharePoint today that employees need to access frequently? And one of the key things that SharePoint agents can really help customers with is to make it easier for their employees to find the information that they need quickly. And then moving beyond just kind of straight up information related content to more knowledge and expertise. The question here I would ask for different stakeholders across the business, whether it's within sales, operations, marketing, finance, legal, are for them to consider, are there areas where they need to provide employees with instant access to specialized knowledge. And by providing people with instant access to expertise, SharePoint agents can really empower people to perform tasks with greater confidence and accuracy. So that's one key set of questions to come at it from a content and knowledge perspective, but also examining opportunities more from a process standpoint. Customers should ask themselves, hey, what are the specific business processes or tasks that could be streamlined or improved through the application of AI assistance, where content is really kind of central or key to those particular processes. And this is another area where SharePoint agents can really shine by helping people get through processes much more quickly and with fewer errors.
Yeah, it helps, I think, for our audience to know what's possible with agents. And I think just hearing the various use cases and some of the things that they should consider if I have this problem area or solution I want to build, how might agents help in that respect? Matt, once customers understand what SharePoint agents are and all the value that you've been talking about here briefly in some of the examples, the value really that will be added overall to their intranet as more people throughout their company start to build out and adopt agents, especially looking at their effectiveness in how people assign and use them within their sites. What are we seeing from an adoption perspective? What does it take to roll out SharePoint agents effectively? Even if you've just seen this during the pilot phase with these customers, are there any best practices for how people can roll out SharePoint agents effectively?
Definitely. We'll talk through some of the best practices that we've seen for rolling out and ultimately adopting. I think one thing to know, just from a general adoption perspective, that's pretty interesting when it comes to AI, is, this is different than traditional software. This is probabilistic based kind of responses versus what users are familiar with traditional software. And so I think that brings unique change perspective that is important to consider. But I also think it opens up a tremendous amount of opportunity. Like, think about it, from a consumption perspective, people interacting with AI tools like SharePoint agents, as long as they can ask good questions, they're going to get what they need. And then to get a little bit more tactical from a rollout standpoint, I would suggest three main steps here. And this is all outlined in the SharePoint Agent Adoption Guide. But first off, we want to help customers get started really quickly to start realizing the value and accelerating that time to value. So encouraging the use of ready-made agents, I think, is a really key step to get started. As you know, and some of your listeners may know, there's two agent types. There's ready-made agents. So every site, gets a SharePoint agent that's out of the box grounded in the content of that site. And then, of course, custom agents where users can create more purpose-built SharePoint agents to suit or satisfy a particular process or scenario. I would also suggest to customers, those who are implementing, that they really encourage users to start with these ready-made agents, but also to reach out to site owners. Because I think there's a great value proposition to people in organizations who own the large portals, whether it's for HR, for legal, or for communications. And the ask there would be for owners to create and promote agents that are grounded in the SharePoint content of their portal. This is a way for them to, unlock further value on the content that they've worked so hard on over the years to curate and deliver in a traditional intranet. So that's to help customers accelerate their time to value by getting started quickly. And then from there, I would suggest really expanding and broadening the range of scenarios. As we announced the private preview back in the summer, we had over 2,000 customers who raised their hand and expressed some interest. And so we had a real opportunity to hear what customers had in mind, how they wanted to use this. So there were literally hundreds, thousands of scenarios that came through. So there's really so much that can be done here. I'm sure we'll speak more about different types of scenarios, but that would be the next step, is expand by unlocking more value with custom agents. And so that's step number 2. Finally, step number 3 after expanding is, as you would with any project like this, learn and improve. And so, that starts with measuring and sharing success. What's the business value that agents are delivering? Get those success stories promoted internally. Again, in the adoption guide, we provide a framework for different metrics and how customers can measure these different areas of value that we're seeing our private preview customers and even beyond now that we're GAing express as value that they're realizing. And then based on, that measurement, hearing from your users as you roll out this capability, use those insights that that you're getting from users to identify and apply agents in new scenarios to further expand and get more value from SharePoint agents.
I think the genesis of what I'd love to hear, and I'm not trying to put the words in your mouth, is that, it's a front end that you ultimately initially program to the right content, but it adheres to the same privacy and security measures that we have in place for any content in SharePoint or throughout Microsoft 365. I think something like that is just grounding the answer in the reality. It's SharePoint. It does feel like a new way to access content, but we don't sidestep any of the access controls that you put in place.
Let me start my answer by just stating plainly that SharePoint agent or SharePoint agents will not give users access to content that they don't already have permissions to see as per the permission policies that have been set in a particular customer's tenant. And so SharePoint agents will respect and will be security trimmed to the content that the user who is interacting with that agent has actual access to, which means in some cases, for some users that may not have access to all of the content that an agent is grounded in, their response may vary a little bit from, say, a user who does have permission to all of the content that the agent is sourced in. And that is the protection to make sure that ultimately users are only seeing content that they have explicitly been given permissions to see within SharePoint.
Yeah, if I can add just one scenario that I saw where this was in practice was I had created the bot for the show and I was using it, and it wasn't a private answer no matter what because of the context of this is all public data. Essentially, all these blogs are now public. But the prompt that I saw when I put the SharePoint agent for the intrazone, which I call Ask IZ, into a Teams chat, I asked it a question and then it prompted me, knowing that the person that I was sharing the answer with wasn't a part of my site, so they didn't natively have access to see the answers. So it prompted me in saying, what do you think about this answer? I found this detail or this information. Is it okay to share? You, Mark, have access to it. In the context of this Teams chat, if you give me permission, you can then share the answer that I've provided. But of course, if I saw something that wasn't okay, it is asking me, prompting me, somebody who does have access to share the information with somebody who maybe doesn't have access. And I really liked that control that was put in place. So I certainly know that there is always, from a Microsoft 365, a security and privacy review of new technology, and just knowing how it's grounded in the common patterns that we see in the SharePoint platform with how people have access to certain pieces of content or not, that of course we would adhere to that. Matt, I wanted to get back to one specific customer verbatim that relates to a little bit of how we started the conversation, and we'll leave out the customer name so that the sentiment is intact, but we're not overexposing any of our private preview customers. But for the listener on the intrazone, the quote is, SharePoint agents are the thing that will drive the most adoption of Copilot in the company. The grounding is the big thing, end quote. You mentioned that grounding was an important part of or a theme that you saw in a lot of the feedback. Can you just expound a little bit more in specifically this quote? What does it tell us about their perceived value and the benefit if they're implementing it, to drive more adoption of Copilot? How is it that agents specifically and how they operate, maybe the ease of use and of course the grounding, plays into the value that people will get collectively out of Microsoft 365 Copilot?
Yeah, I think when you think about whether it's processes or an important topic at an organization or set of projects, when people are looking to work in that context or ask questions, they're really looking for responses that are specific to those areas. And they don't want necessarily to query, as you may see with Microsoft 365 Copilot or other tools, the entirety of the graph of all the organization content for these very more specific use cases or set of topics or processes. There's just a tremendous amount of value that organizations and our customers are seeing in that ability to ground their agent in the authoritative content that is aligned to the scenario that that agent has been created for or is available for. So I think that that's key. The other element that I think is implicit in that customer quote that you shared, the fact that the customer is relating how SharePoint agents will be the thing that drive the most adoption of Copilot. I think that speaks to the ease of creation. SharePoint agents are one of the easiest ways for customers and their users to wield AI for a specific business process or scenario. It's really democratizing the ability to apply AI in very specific ways, meaning you don't need to be a power user. You may, for a lot of the scenarios and processes that customers and their IT teams are hearing as requests, oftentimes they don't require more advanced tools to enable. And so SharePoint agents become a great fit for the majority of those scenarios that business users have, and giving them the ease of creation to be able to do that on their own and get to value that much more quickly.
Yeah, I've seen in the way that we've framed it publicly at Ignite and through a couple of demo videos, the notion of in a few clicks. And I would even assert, based on what you shared a little bit earlier, sometimes in no clicks, because you get a default agent for every site. And just knowing, having done it a few times, I would 100% back it up that it is very easy to establish an agent on your content for your use almost immediately, especially those ones that are already there. So that's great to hear. I would love to turn to just a little bit understanding what agents were created from your perspective, maybe landing it in the context of scenarios, both how we designed the product and what you saw our customers through their range of use cases, whether it was a really horizontal use case or a very verticalized one, like we're going to talk with the legal team and learn a lot about the agent that they built and why. But there's anything that you can share, again, looking at the matrix of customers that you worked with, that were specific ways of describing how SharePoint agents applied to sales or HR, or maybe even, something that's really easy use case or working with frontline workers. Anything that will ground through the scenarios that help people understand how they can use SharePoint agents?
Absolutely. This is my favorite topic. So I appreciate you asking the question, because I think it's really where the rubber hits the road and customers get the value through the promise of AI. The way that I'll answer this question is to share the three main types of use cases or agent types, if you will, that I've heard from over thousands of customers that express some interest in SharePoint agents, and then I'll give some specific examples. So the three main types that I've seen as the primary patterns would be, number one, an expert agent, number two, an information agent, and number three, what I'd like to call an exploratory agent. These names aren't necessarily final or branding, but it's the current framework that I'm using to share the different ways in which SharePoint agents can be used. So let me take a moment, describe each of these a little bit, and give real examples. So to start with, expert agents, these are the sort of agents that employees can use to get instant access to specialized knowledge and advice. And these agents can really empower the average employee to perform a specific task or process with greater confidence and accuracy. And so there's all sorts of different types of expert agents that I've seen customers, both internally and externally, create. Certainly, the CELA marketing agent that we're going to hear about a little later on in the show is an example. But there's also marketers that I've spoken about who are creating agents to help them create better campaigns that are more targeted. And these agents are actually grounded in user personas or buyer personas that them and their research colleagues have created to represent the different types of customers that they market and sell to. The one I particularly like is one of our customers is looking to create a procurement agent so that anytime anyone in the organization needs to execute a contract, they can call upon this procurement or contract expert, And the expert in this case, the expert agent, has been grounded in the way that the organization wants everyone to create and execute a contract when buying something on behalf of the organization. So it's the procurement experts within the company, it's their content, and it allows for greater consistency in how the ways in which contracts should be done at this company get applied in the real world. So, I think that's a really good example of an expert agent. But, across really any domain or function of an organization, I think there's plenty of expert agent opportunities. The second category that I mentioned is information agents. And these are agents that help people easily find information quickly and efficiently. So rather than using the more traditional methods of asking a colleague for an answer, browsing the intranet, searching, they can just ask an agent, whether it's an agent for an entire intranet or the HR portal, agents to get answers to questions about policies, about benefits, IT. Love these information agents so that they've got lots of rich content about the different tools and applications that they support. So rather than having to deal with help desk tickets to point users to these sort of information agents to self-serve, deliver a tremendous amount of time savings and value for everyone. So there's a ton, whether it's helping onboard new hires, answering marketers' questions about companies' branding guidelines, where a lot of this content already exists, and it's just a matter of enabling an agent so that people can get answers rather than having to search for information. The final type is an exploratory agent, or what I like to call them exploratory agents. And this is all about empowering people to explore those really large SharePoint knowledge bases where they can uncover insights and make connections to inform important decisions. So, think about those SharePoint stores with thousands or tens of thousands of documents. Sifting through that to find what you're looking for can be, quite difficult. And where an agent can help here is it will help users, get to the insight that they're looking for much more quickly than they would in using other methods, whether it's helping sellers retrieve information about certain customers or case studies more quickly, or finding information about previous sales bids so that they can create new proposals. Oftentimes, customers will have SharePoint sites that contain all of the proposals written over, decades or the last decade, certainly, where some of that content can be really helpful for new bids. But in the absence of having an agent, people would struggle to find what they're looking for with such a large corpus.
So we've got experts, we've got information, we've got exploratory, and I think the use cases as they span specific audiences that people have in mind, will really ground both people understanding what can I do with these. And I think your interest and expertise in scenarios truly lends people to, I feel with this technology, have your use case defined first before you start building anything. And then you'll start to know, who are we talking to? Who's often going to use the agent? What are they using it for? And how can we best point the agent at the right content? And of course, keep it up to date over time. But thank you for that, because I think it's very helpful to anybody learning about anything new, especially something like SharePoint agents, in the context of what they're commonly used for, and then give them ideas of how they might deploy their own SharePoint agent or agents. We hope people create a bunch of them. So to round us out here, talking with you, Matt, what are the kind of the final thought you'd want to leave with somebody who's heard what you have to say, but also or maybe thinking about getting engaged with SharePoint agents, and any resources that you wanted to call out?
Yeah, for sure. I guess I really hope I've given people the inspiration and a little bit of direction to get started, and to get started quickly. That's something that I would really encourage with all of the talk of, AI this or AI that. Certainly an exciting time that we're living in. Getting to value is what's important these days. And so getting started quickly, whether it's using the ready-made agents that every SharePoint site comes with, or creating your own custom agents, And one of the ways in which customers can get started quickly is a promotion offer that we have. And this is a promotion offer that will be through June 30th, 2025 for organizations who have 50 or more Microsoft 365 Copilot licenses. They're automatically going to receive 10,000 queries per month for SharePoint agents. So this is a great way to get started. It can include users who don't necessarily have a Microsoft 365 Copilot license. So don't feel constrained to that license per se with this promotion offer. And then, from a resource perspective, a lot of what we've spoken about, certainly detail on the different types of scenarios and individual playbooks for some high priority scenarios. That's all available in our SharePoint agent adoption guide. And so I would really encourage folks to take a look at that, which is up on the adoption.microsoft.com site. There's, of course, a SharePoint agent section that you can use to not only find that adoption guide, but all sorts of other materials that will help you get started with SharePoint agents.
Well, I will have a link in the show notes to both the promotion offer details and to the SharePoint agents adoption site. And I wanted to thank you for being our adoption guide for all of the things that you've heard from our early adopters and your own interpretation of what it is thematically that we're hearing that they want to do with agents and how they want to shape them in the future. So, Matt, I wanted to thank you for your time. And maybe in the future, there will be a Matt SharePoint agent where I can just query and I'll have a little podcast with your agent in the future.
I would be excited for that one of these days.
But thank you for joining the Interzone and thank you for your time. All right, so you've learned kind of the broader aspects of what these SharePoint agents are across 80 plus customers. We're now going to dive into one of our core customers who took this journey with the SharePoint team to not only learn about SharePoint agents, but to put them into production. So it's time that we talk to our legal department, our legal team. We call them CELA, and we're joined by Anna and Brent from the CELA team to share a little bit more about what they've done with SharePoint agents. So Anna, Brent, welcome to the Interzone.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having us. My name is Anna Henke-Gunvaldson, and I'm a senior PM in the CELA technology and operations team here at Microsoft. And I'm responsible for developing and managing CELA's internal SharePoint site for Microsoft employees, which is our enterprise portal, CELAWeb.
Oh, I love it. So SharePoint at the core. I kind of knew this going into our conversation, but that means I can ask you some historical SharePoint questions. So thank you for that. Again, welcome, Anna. Brent, can you give us a little bit about who you are at Microsoft? And we'll get into the what you've been doing recently soon.
All right. Thanks, Mark. It's great to be here as well. I am one of the lawyers at Microsoft, and our team actually supports the marketing and advertising organizations. So it is great to be with you and some of the marketing and advertising that you work on at the company.
Yeah, so there is not a miss of content out there about SharePoint agents, but a lot of it is focused on what the product is and certainly, how it works. But to get to the real core of how people are actually putting it into practice in production, you are very brave. And I say that only because it's early days of SharePoint agents. I'm very excited with where they're going to go. I want to be real clear just so that everybody knows the organization that you represent and some of the things that you stand for. CELA, our acronym for you, or your acronym for you, stands for Corporate, External, and Legal Affairs, aka lawyers at Microsoft. Can you give us a sense of the support that you and your team provide within Microsoft, within that community, and of course, other communities that you support?
Yeah, that's great, and that is our acronym, and that is our name. And as it suggests, our organization does actually a lot more than just provide legal advice. We obviously help the business influence and navigate the wide range of regulatory and policy issues that we face as a global company. That said, our team specifically is responsible for providing legal and compliance support on all aspects of the marketing and advertising organization's work here, which means helping teams figure out how we're going to market and position Microsoft's products and services and on a go-forward basis. Now, that I will tell you, Mark, that you probably see a lot of our high visibility work that we do on artificial intelligence and our partnerships with sports leagues like the NFL. And, during sporting events, including the Super Bowl, you'll see our TV spots as well. But it actually includes a lot of behind-the-scenes guidance and a broad array of less visible, but really important and critical day-to-day issues in areas like consumer protection, contracting, privacy, and security. And that's where the AI agents really shine.
I like it. So with the mention of the NFL, let's pivot over to learn a little bit of the history of CELA. We're going to do a two, set, hut, go long. Anna, this one's for you. We're going to go long into the history of SharePoint. And I absolutely know we're going to get a touchdown. But within the group's mission, as we're starting to learn who is CELA and what do they do at Microsoft, obviously the mission and the group have been around for quite some time. And on the historical technical side of things, you mentioned SharePoint. There's this CELA plus SharePoint. Can you give us a sense of, the waves, the journeys that you've been on, maybe the different first downs that you've had if we stay with the NFL, going from on-prem into the cloud, leveraging modern SharePoint, and certainly we'll get into the very modern SharePoint of SharePoint agents. But what are some highlights of that journey, moving CELA and the aspects of the intranet along this SharePoint grow-up model?
Definitely some overtime here, Mark. So CELA has a big presence on SharePoint with the CELAWeb, the enterprise portal. Employees can find guidance for low-risk repeatable tasks, and they can find their legal contacts on that portal and more. And CELAWeb was first built on SharePoint 2010 on-prem, and we managed it with a centralized publishing model. A team of SharePoint experts and our support team helped the content owners keep their content fresh. And that centralized publishing model was required since SharePoint on-prem was rather technical and not as intuitive to use as modern SharePoint. And it was just more efficient to manage with this centralized publishing model. With the advent of SharePoint 2013 and the cloud, CELAWeb was one of the first Microsoft enterprise portals to move to the cloud and onto SharePoint 2013. However, some of the features that we required for easy content management weren't present yet in that platform, so we actually had to build a lot of that functionality and features with our engineering partners. And we still applied a centralized publishing model. When modern SharePoint was released, we were one of the first portals again to onboard to the platform, since the product group, through our collaboration with them, took some of our requirements and custom-built content management functionality and turned it into some of the web parts we see today. Modern SharePoint had come such a long way with its ease of use and intuitive ways to create pages that it actually allowed us to move to a decentralized publishing model, letting the legal experts own, manage, and continuously update their own content. The platform now really empowers them to be proactive content publishers and adjust in real time based on their client feedback. So it really laid the modern SharePoint platform really laid the foundation for this empowerment of the content owners.
One of my favorite things to hear, especially when we talk to teams internally that are on behalf of all of Microsoft employees, or at least a significant number of them, is that feedback loop with the product team. And I know specifically what you've been doing recently with people like Matt, who we just talked to, certainly others like CJ Tan and the product team. But even before that, the history that you just described tells me you've provided a lot of feedback into the product. And it's one of those unsung heroes that I think of as product growth, that there's a lot of information that you put into how the product grew and was planned. So first, my hat's off to being an old timer SharePoint, watching the platform grow. What you just described was that there was a lot of things that you put into the product based on the needs of CELAWeb and the CELA team. So thank you for doing that. And you're doing it again, and that's why we're here to talk about it, which is really exciting. So with the advent of AI being on everybody's mind, certainly the SharePoint team is doing a number of different things with Copilot and the use of AI, and even just what they've been doing for a while with Microsoft Graph. But my question to you, Brent, with AI showing up on the front door, you weren't going to be outdone and dismiss this as an option of how you could adopt that for your use as a lawyer. Rather, you took it head on. There's a business perspective that certainly is behind that in terms of being a decision What I thought might be interesting for our audience to hear is if we were doing an executive review, you first had to position this as something you're going to do and the reason for doing it. How did you pitch that business case for taking on SharePoint agents? Maybe just a little inside baseball, switching from NFL to the MLB so that we can learn a little bit more about maybe how others might pitch it to their IT departments and their business leaders?
Yeah, well, first I'm telling you, we might need a little bit of licensing from the NFL and the MLB if we keep this up, Mark, but I like where you're going with it. Actually, when you ask employees what they want from AI, finding information and answers always lands at the top of their list. That makes a lot of sense because we all hate searching for answers we can't find. The flip side, we love it when we find answers quickly and easily. So we've invested a lot of time, as Anna said, developing rich, comprehensive, and pretty curated content in SharePoint. That includes digestible and understandable guidelines, policies, summaries of laws, trainings, much, much more. Now, sometimes just having a lot of information, however useful that is, isn't enough. People still have to search and navigate to find it, read it, and understand it. And since time is always of the essence, there's a natural human inclination to jump straight to go into live help instead. And that's where the Copilot agent really shines. Instead of manual web navigation, just ask your question to the agent. It gives you what you need quickly with citations for further reading if it's necessary. Now, given our foundation of existing resources, it was super easy to create the Copilot agent to help solve the issues of finding relevant and reliable content quickly. And that's the power of AI, to answer legal questions easily and simply, unlocking their existing resources really in an elegant and a streamlined way.
So I wanted to take a second to combine a little bit of what I heard Anna describe from a CELAWeb perspective and your approach to going straight into it. You have so much great content. You just have to craft the agent and how you want it to work for you. I actually went to CELAWeb in preparing for this, and I saw your beautiful use of the hero web part. And within the hero web part, a giant call out, very similar to what we heard from Matt earlier, described as a good adoption practice. Make it front and center. Get it out there in the hands of those that need it or don't know about it, and now they know so that they know they need it in the future. But going to CELAWeb, clicking into the SharePoint agent that you have set up, I had a lightweight scenario I thought I'd try out. We're running a contest for an upcoming event at the end of January. And I was just curious if the bot, through the SharePoint agent, could tell me a little bit information about, if we're going to have a prize giveaway, what do I need to know? And it gave me a really nice bulleted list answer of here are things that you should do and here are things that you shouldn't do. So I copy pasted and bolded all the things we shouldn't do and sent it to the team. But that was the value of CELAWeb. I, of course, have known that for years as a Microsoft employee, as a destination to learn about different legal questions that you might have. And then front and center, you put the SharePoint agent there. I didn't have any trouble finding it. My reason to go there was to do my homework for the podcast. But off of that, I actually got a good answer for one other project that we're working on. And with that in mind, Brent, if you don't mind, just one more question about the types of legal questions that you would like to see answered by the agent, and maybe even just anecdotally, the kinds of things you don't want the agent to answer.
Well, first off, we love it that you asked that question at the bot. We like to call it an agent, but in any event, it came back with the correct answer because that's exactly what the type of things we want to see go through our agent. We get a lot of questions that can be easily answered by the SharePoint resources we've created. They're generally low risk, very common, repeated questions like giveaways, and those are ideally answered by an agent. That allows us to free up our legal professionals to answer the higher risk, higher impact, more complex questions. So for example, our marketers may also ask whether they can use AI to create marketing materials or how to represent themselves in social media. And the agent can easily answer those questions drawing on our existing content and policies and can direct our clients to the underlying resources if they have more questions. That said, the agent is a good starting point for just about any question because even for important, higher, complex issues that the legal team should handle, the agent can help give the client a baseline understanding of the legal landscape. And so the discussion with our team can focus on key areas that are a little bit more complicated or more nuanced. Now, I want to really stress, and it's very important to note, that the agent isn't a replacement for legal professionals. It's a useful assistant, just like SharePoint is, that can really help optimize the process of legal review for all involved.
Yeah, I think I hear that a lot, both in how customers are interpreting what is Microsoft 365 Copilot holistically. Is it the thing that's going to replace my job? No. Is it more of an assistant for various tasks and activities? Absolutely. And I think especially when you get down to the level of a SharePoint agent, it's highly targeted to a grounded source of content that is really intended to answer very specific questions, even if the value of Copilot means you can ask your question in a very natural language way, and you can do research. You can, treat it as a research assistant. But I think you're right, certainly, not only to emphasize how it is that you're deploying the SharePoint agent. It's not meant to replace anybody in the legal profession, but it should save a lot of people time, if anything, to have a much more informed and prepared discussion when time is limited on everybody's calendar. And now I'm thinking of the past in ways that people might have accomplished this, and I don't want to pit or put SharePoint against itself. But when you think of common things in the past like SharePoint Search, or what we now call Microsoft Search, versus SharePoint agents, are you finding the outcomes similar? Are there different benefits that you're seeing now to Microsoft employees when they come to the CELA portal, they're on CELAWeb, and instead of just doing a generic search, they're having an intelligent conversation? I don't want to weight my answer with how I phrase it, your answer with how I phrase it, but what do you think, search versus SharePoint agents?
First, I love SharePoint, and we've used it with great success over many, many years. And I think you framed the question in the right way, because it's really about how the agent can work with SharePoint and your underlying content to deliver even better results. Now, since this is a legal agent, we needed to ensure that it was both accurate as well as efficient for our clients. So we tested it. We actually ran a case study using 5 testers and gave them 6 legal questions to answer using the agent or using standard search and navigation. We timed how long it took for both. So we stopped the clock either 1, when they were satisfied that they'd found the correct answer, or 2, at 5 minutes if they didn't find the correct answer. Now, in terms of accuracy, participants found the correct answer 100% of the time using the Copilot agent. In comparison, when using search and navigation, 16% of the questions went unanswered. In terms of efficiency, participants found the answers much more quickly as well. Using the Copilot agent, almost half of the time the answer was found and confirmed in under 1 minute, and 100% of the time it was found in under 2 minutes. Now, on average, the Copilot agent was nearly 3 times faster at finding answers than search and navigation, which is a really impressive difference between the two.
Yeah, it is really impressive. And Anna, I want you to jump in as well. My immediate response is, that's great for 5 people. Now times that for however it helps, whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 times faster. That's a lot of time, especially, as the size of your company or the people that are leveraging these technologies. That's a lot of saved time. And it's really cool that you did that work to discover what works best and kind of go with what works best. But Anna, you had a comment.
Yes, given the history of CELAWeb and how SharePoint evolved the search capabilities and capacities, search has come a long way as well in the SharePoint, in the latest SharePoint platform. I think that the big difference really is, we have enterprise best bets, we have, all these top search results and all those best practices. But the user still has to make a decision. Should I click the first link or the second link? And with the SharePoint agents, that kind of don't make me think approach is totally applied, because you also get the answer in a natural format. And the search results are still the document title, maybe the description or the summary of the page or the document that appeared in the search results. And with SharePoint agents, it's a lot more natural. It's like you're talking with somebody and it's friendly, and you don't have to decide, should I click the page at the bottom of the search results or the top one? And on top of that, the SharePoint agents then give you the page or document that they used for their answer as a resource. So you can go and do that research, but the initial kind of hurdle of, okay, I can't decide what search result I should click is taken away. So that makes it faster also, I think.
Yeah, I think it makes it faster. It also makes it more adaptable. In the past, with SharePoint specifically, you could build a really nice search experience with best bets and top results and, different content types and refiners and all that good stuff, which is all still there and all relevant for certain things. But to the point we've been talking about, and you just emphasized, this is a conversation that you're having with an entity that is very grounded in really great content, and call it the source that doesn't sway from the truth, especially the type of material that you're putting forward, but in a way that you don't have to necessarily know how to search well. You just have to trust yourself that I can have a discussion, refine, based on the answers that are given. And it does a lot of that work for you, where you don't have to have one uber SharePoint search page that it works for everybody. You just have to maybe go through a couple of motions of people understanding how Copilot works, and of course, specific how SharePoint agents then work in context with how Copilot works with SharePoint. So the dangerous part is you go through a pilot phase, you get some good numbers, and you decide we're moving into production. And that's both, for the reasons why, to save your team time and to help the Microsoft field. It's not yet everyone, but I think you had mentioned there's about 3,000 people that will be leveraging this legal agent, the CELAWeb agent, specifically to turn for help on their own time. And then, of course, like you mentioned, to at some point maybe lean in and hold an intelligent conversation with somebody who can help refine the finer details. But how do you, as a team that manages both CELAWeb and kind of the business behind it, see making SharePoint agents more relevant over time, not just for in-production release, but do you already think about how you tweak so that you get the most relevant and accurate agent over time? And maybe Anna, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I'd like to go back to the journey that the CELAWeb portal took on the various SharePoint versions. And with modern SharePoint, we were finally able to place accountability for updating content into the hands of the legal subject matter experts. And like I said, really empowered them with an easy to use platform. And that really laid the foundation for solid content that is now delivering accurate and relevant AI generated answers. And keeping that underlying content updated, concise, and easy to understand is then indirectly tweaking the Copilot agents in that it gives them only the best and most up-to-date content to work with.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that, Anna, because when you think about the content in an agent, the answers it's going to give are only is going to be as good as the underlying content, and it has to be fresh and relevant. As with AI in general, the quality of your output is going to depend on the quality of the data it leverages. So I really encourage people to think about their underlying data and spending a lot of time to make sure that that's great. And that's where you're going to actually get the multiplier effect throughout your organization. In addition to that, I want people to sort of take a step back and experiment with their agents. These are super easy to create. It's actually surprising how easy they are to create. And you should create a number of them. For instance, we did testing and we found that a highly specialized agent designed for specific tasks may be more appropriate for some needs than a general agent. And it might be more accurate because there's less data it's drawing on. So you should design multiple agents for different tasks, testing them as you go, developing processes to ensure that people understand how best to use them as well is going to be critical. One great thing about Copilot agents is that they can be easily customized to your needs before and after you deploy them. So as information organizations change, so too can the agent, and it can grow and adapt right along with you.
I can see, it's not going to be that people take SharePoint agents and recreate Microsoft 365 Copilot. That is, if they really tried to create the Uber agent for everything across the whole company, all aspects of legal and HR and IT and whatnot. It's unrealistic. And as you get more to the concrete types of conversations that your organization holds, it probably self-defines. Well, we need an agent for that, and we need an agent for that. And maybe you have multiple sites, and great, you have multiple agents on multiple sites. I think as people think about broader things like their information management, where does the content live, who owns it, who has access to it, that'll also self-define where might there be a helpful agent. It doesn't have to be just one. And if you're a team that manages lots of different types of conversations, like I know you all do, that resonates with me. And I think it's really nice to know that the technology supports that approach.
Mark, that also allows you as the content or information owner not to feel overwhelmed trying to kind of boil the ocean of all the content that you have and make sure that the entire scope of your content is up to date and, fresh. If you have these specific agents and you know where they should live, focus on that content first and update that, maybe archive some of the older content, but you don't have to feel overwhelmed about, oh my gosh, I'll never be able to create an agent because I have this huge scope of outdated content. Where should I start? I think Brent's example is a great example of really focused curation of content for that specific agent.
I think that's a great point. The word that you used that I liked the most, and I liked it all, was archive. Get rid of older content that might be already baked in your original design for a good reason. But if after 6 months to a couple of years, there's content that just isn't relevant, you don't want the agent to promote that in any way, even if people are asking similar questions to what that original content was for. I really like that idea of archiving, meaning that the most relevant answer that agent can then provide is then based on only good content, not content that should have been archived. So great points, and really great to hear that, that's an ongoing management aspect that I think people should be aware of for not adopting it just originally, but adopting and managing it over time. So we talked a little bit earlier about how you fed in a lot of great information and insights back to the product team. And my concept at this stage is your early phase using as it is, as you've helped design it to get it out to what we're now at general availability and people starting to use it truly in production for themselves. But if you, from your next level of asks perspective back to the product team, now that you have it in production and you probably already have a laundry list of things that you'd love for it to do next, let's talk some hopes and dreams, and this can be from both of you. When you think of, we'd really love it if SharePoint could do X or Y, and you certainly have the ear of our engineering peers, what are some of those feature requests without exposing anything that we know of as really solid plans, because we'll save that when we can share it. But just as you've started to use it, what are some of those things where we can, make sure people are aware of that you've come across, that they at least know that you've told the engineering team about? Anna?
Yes, sure. So going back to the archival of, outdated contents is part for me of keeping the end-to-end content management intuitive and efficient and effective. So identifying ways to archive outdated content so that not only the web page content stays current, but also, like we said, the agents have the best content to work with. And maybe we can even use agents or AI in the future to help us with this task, which can also be a little overwhelming. And then in the context of AI and agents, kind of always expanding the scope of data that can be used for the agents. And then the data could either be included automatically, depending on the structure of your SharePoint site, or it could be included manually.
Okay. Well, one of the things, just so you know, that Matt mentioned a little bit earlier was the focus of the SharePoint team to broaden the different content types and sources that it would be able to pull from. So it might mean that you are able to manage things a little bit more cleanly, not just in documents and pages, but in lists or even, back-end systems that we're able to pull from. So not to over reveal anything there. It's certainly feedback that Matt heard loud and clear. You're echoing the same. And I think, anything that can keep unwanted or outdated content from bubbling up so that it doesn't cause confusion or just represent in a way that it shouldn't, I think is a really good one. So we'll not only hear you heard it first, but I will double down and make sure that feedback gets back to the folks that I know too, and we'll attack them from all angles. Any hopes and dreams, Brent, from your use and awareness of SharePoint agents today and what they should be tomorrow?
Yeah, well, let's go full circle on this one, Mark, and go back to the NFL and fantasy football teams, because everyone wants data when they're talking about picking and choosing their teams, and the same is true with these types of agents. I'd love to have more information regarding usage statistics, what questions are being asked, how they're being asked, receiving feedback to help refine our content and our underlying content. I think would be really helpful. That'll allow us to constantly evaluate how our agent is doing, and hopefully improve it over time. One of the things for sure is the technology is only going to get better. So I'm very excited to see what the future holds with this, and we'll control what we can, which is to ensure that the content is up to date and readily accessible for our clients internally.
Yeah, there's kind of the trifecta of you own your content, and that's the generic you. Anybody that's building an agent owns their site, their content. There's the SharePoint platform, which is making improvements left and right for lots of different ways that people interact with content and are able to keep things fresh and updated, and of course, search and usability and collaboration. And then there's just this notion of, as Copilot itself grows up, the language models are going to get better. The technology of being able to tap into the Copilot API for how the SharePoint team uses it is going to get better. And it's going to get better as that round trips. There's all the information you've fed back into the team and the product. There's also that coming at scale from our customers, not just the 80 plus that Matt has talked to, but now in real use. I'm sure there's a great flood of detail that's coming to how people are wanting this to work, both today and tomorrow. And it's really great to hear your insights from actual hands-on, kind of the now that we've gotten it to here, here's where we want to take it. So I wanted to thank you not only for your time today, but just selfishly, I have in my past been a marketer with lots of public outreach. And when we had different events or different things, like I mentioned, like prize giveaways of the past, there was always let's check in with CELA to make sure that we're buttoned up and ready, and that the language is right, that it's accurate, and that we're keeping ourselves and our customers safe with how we present and promote our material. So I've worked with CELA in the past in a lot of different ways. It's really fun to work with you today and to hear your use of SharePoint agents. I want to give you the 2 seconds elevator pitch. Is there any last thought that you have for our audience as they're thinking about building or leveraging their first SharePoint agent? Anna?
Don't be afraid. Just go with it.
Don't be afraid. Just go with it. Are we still talking about agents? Or are we talking I feel like I just moved into you being my life coach for a second. Okay, don't be afraid. Just go for it. Okay, don't be afraid. Brent, what's your last thought?
You know what? I actually am not going to give you one of those, Mark. I'm going to say one other thing, which is the next time you want to come and talk to CELA, talk to my agent at first. see if you get the right answer, and I'd be happy to answer any follow-up questions for you. And that's the kind of cultural change that we're hoping that these agents will drive, because it will really drive the efficiencies that we're looking for out of these types of tools.
I will take that to heart. I will save you and me time, and I'll follow your lead. But again, thank you both for being on the Interzone and your willingness to share a lot of the inside baseball, football. We didn't get to hockey. There's got to be some, see where the puck is going, that kind of reference. But certainly to encourage our audience to learn more about SharePoint agents, both what they are today and to help us shape for what they are tomorrow. So have a wonderful rest of your day. But again, thanks for being on the Interzone.
Thanks for having us.
The SharePoint team is hard at work on a unique case study with the Microsoft legal team that we've been speaking to, and we will note when it's ready. For now, bookmark this aka.ms link that will redirect you to the case study when it gets published. The link is aka.ms/SharePoint/agents/MS legal. When it's ready, it's a great case study to go into more depth of how the Microsoft legal team leveraged SharePoint agents. Second resource is the new SharePoint Agents Adoption Guide that is also within the broader adoption.microsoft.com page dedicated to SharePoint agents. I'll have both those links, but the newest one is for the adoption guide. If you go to aka.ms/SharePoint/agents/adoption guide. So that's the CELA marketing case study, and the new SharePoint Agents adoption guide. Great resources to dig in further to learn about what you heard today, and then, of course, to learn more broadly about how SharePoint agents can be best adopted within your organization. With that, I just have a few events that I want to highlight. The first event is coming up at the end of January. This is an online event. It's free. It's with Jeff Tieper and team talking about SharePoint from concept to creation to impact. There's going to be a big focus in the first part of this event that will have a lot of insights into what you can do now with SharePoint from an intranet perspective, all the new page innovation, the news innovation, web parts, section layouts, how you can build out beautiful custom portals, not only just in a few clicks with a lot of templates and the ease of use, but just a lot of the different scenarios of how we are seeing people use the technology, not just from a platform perspective, but for real specific use, including a lot of what you've heard today with the SharePoint agents intact. They really do bring all of those sites and portals to life, just like you heard how SharePoint agents are bringing the CELAWeb to a new level of engagement and interaction on the site itself. So there's a great event. It also has a live AMA where we've got about 4 or 5 of our subject matter experts on tap live to answer your questions off of what Jeff and team share so that you can ask your questions about SharePoint pages, SharePoint sites, SharePoint news, SharePoint agents. The list goes on. It's going to be a big, broad event for SharePoint with a lot of people engaged, myself included. That's on January 29th from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific time. Expect it to be a very informative half hour to learn and then a half hour to engage, with the full breadth of the 60 minutes being a great way to learn about what SharePoint is today and how you can take it from concept to creation to impact with your own sites that you will create. The next event is M365 Miami 2025. As you can expect, this is in February 6th through 7th of 2025 in Miami, Florida. There's a great team behind this that's putting on the event. Expect that it's a full couple of days of lots of sessions across OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, Microsoft Copilot, all the things from Power Platform and all the newness around Microsoft Fabric, Microsoft Purview. Great agenda. I encourage you to click the link so you can see what's going on in Miami and make a plan to join it. Then, if you're an MVP or a regional director, there is the MVP Summit coming up in 2025. That's in Redmond and online, March 24th through the 27th, 2025. It is an under NDA type event, so I know it's not applicable to everyone, but just knowing that it's happening, it really is to ensure that some of your closest trusted advisors, those Microsoft MVPs, are going to get a lot of knowledge in their head so that they can then be fluent when it is time to roll out some of those technologies that they've learned about, so that they can hold really high-level conversations and make good planning with you. So the MVP Summit, it's in March. Commonly then, a lot of the information comes out in the May to the November timeframe. Again, always lean on an MVP if you can access their knowledge and information, and know that if they attend the MVP Summit in March, they'll be very ready and up to speed on all things that Microsoft is planning. The last one that I'll leave you with is the Microsoft 365 Community Conference. This is May 5th through the 8th, 2025 in Las Vegas. There's a couple of nice keynotes that are being planned across Jeff Tieper, Jared Spataro. There's also one that's being planned specific to the security updates and information with Vasu. And you can expect that there's going to be a breadth of content from Microsoft, for Microsoft MVPs, community leaders giving a lot of great sessions, workshops, engaging on various activities in the community lounge, in the expo hall. The list goes on. It's a big conference. It's one that we support in a significant way under Jeff Tieper's leadership, with my manager, Caruana Gatumu, and also Heather Cook leading the charge, defining what it is that is going to be the Microsoft experience at the event, working closely with the event team and, of course, with everybody else that's involved to make it a great event. So again, that's the Microsoft 365 Community Conference, May 5th through the 8th in Las Vegas, Nevada. There is also always an ongoing resource I want to make sure that you know about if you don't already, called communitydays.org. This is a website where you can see all of the events, and I'll encourage you to also click on the calls in the top navigation so you can see all these different things in person, online, variety of regions and different countries and cities all over the world putting on events. They have the ability to easily share them to highlight what events are happening throughout the year so that you can make your plan to visit or attend an event online, in person. Everything that I spoke about just a few minutes ago is in communitydays.org. So there are both free and paid events and the calls that you can access year-round that happen on a weekly basis. It's a great resource, communitydays.org. Mark it within your browser and check it every once in a while to see what's happening around you. I wanted to thank our guests, Matt Wolodarsky, Brent Sanders, and Anna Henke-Gunvaldson for sharing their knowledge and real-world application of SharePoint agents. We encourage you to check out our show page for links to all that was discussed and more. Go to aka.ms/theinterzone. You can also send us your questions and feedback for the SharePoint teams. You can reach us via email at theinterzone@microsoft.com or via Twitter @SharePoint and @mcashman. If you want to come directly to me, I will always channel feedback and questions to the right people. Please remember to rate and review and tell all your friends about the show. That is how we get the word out to help grow what it is that we're sharing. We hope that it is great information for you. And if you think so too, please share it with your friends, family, peers, partners, customers, anybody that will listen so that they can get this, The Intrazone, on their favorite tech podcast feeds next. Thanks for listening. I'm Mark Cashman with the help from a few SharePoint agents. And this has been The Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 agents at your service intelligent intranet.